Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble, and I'm your host, Alex D. Tremble. Today, I want to talk about something personal but incredibly freeing for anyone in leadership position, or honestly, anyone just trying to live a lighter life. Let's be honest. We've all had those moments where someone's actions hurt us, undermine us, or just left us with a scar we didn't expect. A colleague who talked behind your back, a friend who pulled away without explanation, a family member whose words still echo years later. And it's natural to take it personally. You think, what did I do wrong? Why did they treat me this way? Why did I deserve this? But what if I told you that the most of the pain we carry isn't about it? It's about what we made it mean. What if I told you that learning not to take things personally can lighten your emotional load more than almost anything else you can do for your mental health and for your leadership capacity? So, for those who don't know me, I'm an executive coach and the author of Leadership Sucks Sometimes. I work with leaders across Fortune 500 companies, federal agencies, from senior executives at Microsoft to directors at the FBI. And I've had the opportunity to witness some amazing stuff. And I can tell you one thing: the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid being hurt. They're the ones who've learned how to release what isn't theirs to carry. And I say this not from theory, but from personal experience. I've had moments in my life where someone's actions felt like a direct assault against who I was as an individual, where I internalize other people's choices as reflection of my own worth. But here's what I've learned: the moment you stop personalizing other people's behavior is the moment you reclaim your peace, your power, and your purpose. Here's the truth: most of the time, when someone does something that hurts you, it's not actually about you, it's about them, their fears, their priorities, their insecurities, or even their survival instinct. That doesn't make it hurt any less. It doesn't mean it's okay, but it does mean that carrying that pain around like it's your personal responsibility doesn't serve you at all. When you take things personally, you give away your power. You hand over control over your peace to someone who may not even be thinking about you anymore. And leaders who can't go and let go of that weight, they start leading from resentment, not reflection, from reaction and not response. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, it means freeing yourself to move forward. Let me share something personal. I spent years feeling hurt by my biological, the man who left when I was just a few days old. For a long time, that pain lived in me quietly, shaping the way I saw the world, how I held myself, the stories I told myself. I must not have been enough. Something must have been wrong with me. If I just worked hard enough, if I had achieved enough, that maybe one day he'll think I was worth being around. And when I met him as an adult, the pain, fear flared up all over again. I remember we were in the DC area because he was in the area for a time and I was living there. And we ended up connecting and we decided to go to the mall. We just sit on a bench in the mall. And he's told me stories about the wonderful things he had done for his children, buying them cars, helping them with down payment for their home. Matter of fact, wasn't down payment, he bought one of them a home, taking them traveling all around the world, things he had never done for me. And I remember walking away from that meeting angry that he hadn't shown up, angry that he seemed proud of being the father I wish he had been for me. For a long time, I carried that anger like a badge of my identity. But then one day recently, actually, I realized that his actions weren't about hurting me. He wasn't plotting my pain. He was living the only life he knew how to live with the tools and the mindset he had at the time. It wasn't personal, even though it felt deeply personal. And that realization didn't erase the hurt. I still, if I'm being completely honest, do not care for the guy. But it freed me from carrying his choices like they were mine. I want you to take a moment right now to think about someone who's hurt you. Maybe it was a boss who passed you over for a promotion. Maybe it was a friend who stopped calling. Maybe it was a parent who didn't show up the way you needed. Ask yourself, what story did I tell myself about why they did it? And what if that story isn't true? What if their actions were about them and not you? You'd be amazed how much lighter you feel if you simply let go of the story that keeps you stuck. Now, let's bring this back to leadership. I've coached executives who spent years carrying resentment from a single moment, a decision made by a former boss, a board, or even a colleague. One leader told me, yeah, I remember, he said, Alex, I'll never forgive them for what they did. They ruined my career. I asked him, how long ago did this happen? He said, 12 years. I said, 12 years. And you've given them 12 years of your emotional energy. They probably hadn't thought about you maybe once or twice since this happened. Silence, then tears. He wasn't angry at them anymore. He was angry at himself for holding on for so long. And that's when he finally let go. Here's why I told him, and I'll tell you the same exact thing. When you stop carrying other people's baggage, you start moving faster toward your own purpose. I I heard this story years ago, and I love it. It's about these two monks. Um, so I want to share it with you because I think it illustrates the point very clearly. There's a famous Zen story that beautifully illustrates this. It's like, so the two monks were walking through a village after a heavy rain. They came across a woman standing beside a puddle too deep to cross without ruining her dress. One monk, without hesitation, picked her up, carried her across, set her down, and continued walking. The other monk didn't say a word for hours. Finally, as the sun was setting, the second monk said, you know, brother, we're not supposed to touch women. Why did you do that? The first monk smiled and said, I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? That's us. That's leadership. That's life. Most of us are still carrying people who've long since been set down. The people who criticized you 5 years ago, the colleague who took credit for your work, the parent who didn't understand you, they're sleeping peacefully while you're up at night replaying the moment over and over and over and over. It's time to put them down. You know, you know, I never in these podcasts without some sort of practical application, something that you can do to take a step forward. Because that's what I do. Right? Whether it's a speaking opportunity, whether it's a workshop, whether it's coaching, there's always going to be something that you can take action towards. So here's what I want you to take away from this. First, recognize what's yours. When something hurts, ask yourself, what part of this is mine to carry? And what part of this isn't? Most of the time, your part is simply deciding how to respond, not how they react. Second, reframe their behavior. People act out of fear, their limitations, their unmet needs. It doesn't make it right, but it does make it human. And finally, release it intentionally. Write it down, talk it out, pray, meditate, whatever you need to do, but release it. Because you cannot lead others if you're still weighed down by the ghosts from the past. So let's slow this down for a moment. Think about one situation that still lingers in your mind, something that shouldn't still have power over you, but somehow does. Now imagine yourself setting it down. Literally, picture it. You pick it up. All that resentment, all that disappointment, and you can set it down. And then walk away like you can breathe again. You can think clearly again. You can lead fully again. That's what letting go feels like. Let's wrap up today's reflection with a start, stop, continue. I'll say before I say it, I really appreciate all of you allowing me the space to share some of my personal stories and personal reflections. Honestly, this whole thing with my biological father, it was maybe a few months ago. I am now 40 years old. And it wasn't until maybe a month or two ago that it just clicked for me that his behaviors, all the stuff he did had nothing to do with me. He thought he made the decision that he thought was best for him and the family he would have in the future. But for so long, I harbored so many heavy feelings towards him. And he never thought about me. That's the messed up part, right? Is that when we hold these feelings, these things in our brain, they can slow us down. They impact how we operate, how we think, how we have engaged in relationships with other people. But the person that we're thinking about in those situations, the person who we believe is impacting us, isn't even thinking about us. They over here taking up what's the saying? Uh, taking up space without paying rent. Okay. Let's get to the start, stop, continue. So I'd like you to start recognizing when someone's actions aren't about you personally. You don't have to absorb. their pain to be empathetic. Second, stop carrying the weight of other people's choices longer than what you need to. It's heavy, and it was never meant to be yours. And third, continue addressing issues professionally, but free yourself from the emotional load that keeps you tethered to the past. As I wrote in Leadership Sucks, sometimes you can't move forward if your heart is still anchored to the moment you can't change. That's the truth. You can't lead forward if you're living backwards. Here's the reality. Leadership is as much about letting go as it is about holding on. Letting go of resentment, letting go of judgment, letting go of the need to control how other people act, think, or feel. Because when you finally let go of the weight that isn't yours, you make space for peace, for clarity, for growth. And that's where real leadership begins. As always, I encourage you, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.